And now we'll hear from Mr. William K. Black, Associate Professor of Economics and Law, the University of Missouri, Kansas City School of Law. Mr. Black.
Committee, thank you. You asked earlier for a stern regulator. You have one now in front of you. And we need to be blunt. And you haven't heard much bluntness in hours of testimony. We stopped a non-prime crisis before it became a crisis in 1991 by supervisory actions. We did it so effectively that people have forgotten it even existed, even though it caused several $100 million in losses, but none to the taxpayers. We did it by preemptive litigation and by supervision. We broke a raging epidemic of accounting control fraud without new legislation in the period 1984 through 1986. Legislation would have been helpful. We sought legislation, but we didn't get it. And we were able to stop that because we didn't simply continue business as usual. Lehman's failure is a story in large part of fraud. And it is fraud that begins at the absolute latest in 2001. And that is with their subprime and their liar's loan operation. Lehman was the leading purveyor of liar's loans in the world for most of this decade. Studies on liar's loans show incidence of fraud of 90%. Lehman sold this to the world with reps and warranties that there were no such frauds. If you want to know why we have a global crisis, in large part, it is before you, but it hasn't been discussed today, amazingly. Financial institution leaders are not engaged in risk when they engage in liar's loans. Liar's loans will cause a failure. They lose money. The only way to make money is to deceive others by selling bad paper, and that will eventually lead to liability and failure as well. When people cheat, you cannot, as a regulator, continue business as usual. They go into a different category, and you must act completely differently as a regulator. When we've gotten and said sad excuses, the SEC, we're told there are only 24 people in their comprehensive program. Who decided how many people there would be in their comprehensive program? Who decided the staffing? The SEC did. To say that we only had 24 people is not to create an excuse. It's to give an admission of criminal negligence, except it's not criminal because you're a federal employee. In the context of the FDIC, Secretary Geithner testified today that this event pushed the financial system to the brink of collapse. But Chairman Bernanke testified we sent 2 people to be on site at Lehman. We sent 50 credit people to the largest savings and loan in America. It had $30 billion in assets. We had a whole lot less staff than the Fed does. We forced out the CEO. We replaced the CEO, and we did that not through regulation, but because of our leverage as creditors. Now, I ask you, who had more leverage as creditors in 2008? The Fed compared to the Federal Home Loan Bank of San Francisco 19 years earlier? Incomprehensible greater leverage in the Fed, and it simply was not used. And we've heard it. So let's start with the repos. We have known since Enron in 2001 that this is a common scam in which every major bank that was approached by Enron agreed to help them deceive creditors and investors by doing these kind of transactions. And so what happened? There was a proposal in 2004 to stop it. And the regulatory heads, it was an interagency effort, killed it. They came out with something pathetic in 2006 and stalled its implementation to 2007, but it's meaningless. We have known for a decade that these are frauds, we have known for a decade how to stop them. All of the major regulatory agencies were complicit in that statement in destroying it. We have a self-fulfilling policy of regulatory failure because of the leadership in this era. We have the Fed, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, finding that this is three-card Monte. Well, what would you do as a regulator if you knew that one of the largest enterprises in the world, when the nation is on the brink of collapse, economic collapse, is engaged in fraud, three-card Monte? Would you continue business as usual? That's what was done. Oh, they met a lot. They say that we only had a nuclear stick. Sounds pretty good stick to use if you're on the brink of collapse of the system. But that's not what the Fed has to do. The Fed is a central bank. Central banks for centuries have gotten rid of the heads of financial institutions. The Bank of England does it with a luncheon. The board of directors are invited. They don't say no. They are sat down. The head of the Bank of England says, "We have lost confidence in the CEO of your enterprise. We believe that Mr. Jones would be an effective replacement." And by 4 o'clock that day, Mr. Jones is running the place. And he has a mandate to clean up all the problems. Instead, every day that Lehman remained under its leadership, the exposure of the American people to loss grew by hundreds of millions of dollars on average. Aurora was pumping out up to $3 billion a month in liar's loans. Losses on those are running roughly 50% to 85 cents on the dollar. It is critical not to do business as usual, to change. We've also heard from Secretary Geithner and Chairman Bernanke, we couldn't deal with these lenders because we had no authority over them. The Fed had unique authority since 1994 under HOEPA to regulate all mortgage lenders. It finally used it in 2008. They could have stopped Aurora. They could have stopped the subprime unit of Lehman that was really a liar's loan place as well as time went by. Thank you very much.